guys, today we are going to be working on lesson 12.3, which is comparing decimals. All right, so let's read through the lesson. The essential question is, how do you compare decimals? Donovan ran the 100-meter race in 10 and 11 hundredths seconds. Sal ran the same race in 10 and 9 hundredths seconds. Who had the faster time? So when you're reading decimals, a lot of times people want to say like 10.11. And if you read it like that, that's fine. But the proper way is to say 11 hundredths and 9 hundredths because those decimals end in the hundredths place. I showed you my place value chart, and we'll be using that a little bit again today. So if your decimal point is here and your last digit is in this location, then you would read it hundredths. And if your last digit is in this location, if you only have a digit after the decimal point to the right, then that would be tenths. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So Donovan ran 10 and 11 hundredths, and Sal ran 10 and 9 hundredths. We want to know who had the faster time. So when we're talking about the faster time, that's the lesser number. So we're looking for the lesser number here to know who ran the race faster, because when you're running, you want your time to get less and less because that means you're running faster. So looking at different ways to compare decimals, the first way that they show us is using a hundredths grid. We'll be looking at those a little bit today and some blocks. However, we'll be talking more about these two strategies and how they blend together. So when you're looking at the hundredths grid, it's good because it's a visual model. So in the visual model, you can see that there's more boxes filled in to represent more seconds and more time. So we can see that this is the lesser number because there's less boxes filled in, but you won't always have a hundredths grid, so it's important to know the other ways. So I'm not going to read these from the paper. I made a more concise list of just what to look for when you're comparing decimals. So when you're comparing decimals, and this is really with like comparing any number, you start all the way on the left. So you start on the left, and that would be the largest place value. Just as an example, if I did write a number in my place value chart, starting on the left would be starting at the greatest value, so at the hundredths place. Now, I'm not comparing this to anything right now, but if I were, I would start comparing the number here, especially if they had the same amount of digits. They do not have the same amount of digits. The number that has more digits before the decimal place would be the larger number. So first, start on the left, then work your way over until the digits differ. So when you start to see a different digit, you know that you can compare there, and then you can use place value to compare. So use what you know in your number sense about how much a digit is worth in a certain place to help you. And here's our example of the times. We have Donovan and we have Donovan and we have Sal. Okay, so they both have a 1 and a 0 before the decimal point, so they're the same there, but their numbers are different after the decimal point. So just first, if you were comparing them, you would look at the digit on the left. They're both a 1, so you can't compare them there. They're the same. Next, we have a 0 in the ones place. You can't compare them there because they're the same digit. After the decimal point, here we have a 0, and here we have a 1. After the tenths, we're in the hundredths. So there's some different tricks that you can use in comparing here. First, if we're looking at the hundredths, 9 hundredths is more than 11 hundredths. So if you were to just look at this separately, what you have after the decimal point, you have 2 digits there. So compare the number 9 to the number 11. 11 is greater than 9, therefore 10 and 9 hundredths is less than 10 and 11 hundredths. So since 9 is less than 11, 9 hundredths is less than 11 hundredths, we can say that this decimal is the lesser of the two. Therefore, who had the faster time? Sal had the faster time with 10 and 900ths. I'm going to be using the place value chart a lot today. I did mention, I think in my other video, that you could try to make one of these at home. I'm lucky that I have a communicator, so I can write on it with the dry erase marker and erase it. But if you do write your own out at home, then you can always just use a very light pencil to write numbers in it, and then you can just erase it and use it again. I'm going to draw a line through mine because I'm going to be comparing two different numbers, so I'm going to need two boxes. Okay, so put that to the side for right now. And I'm going to be talking about the convince me. Write 4 different digits in the blank spaces to make each comparison true. Explain your reasoning. This is a little bit challenging. You have to pay attention to also the digits that are already there and where the decimal is. So why don't you try that really quick, and then you can unpause the video to see how I go over it. So the first thing that I did, I said, okay, they both have a 0 in their ones place before the decimal. They both have a digit in the hundredths place and a blank before it. So I have to look at the symbol as well. We want this to be less because we want this one to be greater than, due to the fact that the symbol is facing, the greater than symbol is facing this number. So whatever I put here, I want to be bigger than what I put there. So you can put maybe a 4 here, but if I put a 4 there, then I want the digit here to be bigger, so I'll just put a 5. And I'm going to show it on the place value chart. And I had 4 and 8. So here's like my decimal point. And then I had 0 in my ones, 5 in my tenths. So when we're comparing, start on the left. In the ones place before the decimal, they both have a 0. So we work our way over. Now we're comparing them here. Which digit is greater? 5 is greater than 4, therefore 57 hundredths is greater than 48 hundredths. And if we were talking about money, I always say the best way to learn about decimals, it's a very easy concept to understand if we're talking about money, because that would be like 48 cents compared to 57 cents. And using money is the most common way that we probably use decimals in everyday life. All right, this one's a little bit different. They have a missing digit in the hundredths here and a missing digit in the tenths here. So I would use my place value chart to help. So when we're comparing and we're starting on the left, we are going to look at the tens place. If I want this one to be less and I want this one to be greater, I want whatever I put here to be less than 5. So I'll pick a 1. And it doesn't really matter what digit we put in our hundredths because we already know now that 5 is greater than 1. So you could put anything here. I'll just put a 0. So if we were reading it in terms of change, that would be 19 cents and that would be 50 cents. Or we would call it 19 hundredths. We can call this 50 hundredths, or we can call it 5 tenths. And I will talk about what that means with that 0 in one of the later problems. So here I'm going to write a 0, and I'm going to write a 9 here. So my place value chart really helped me answer that question. On this page, we have to complete 1 through 5. So here is where I will be talking about that 0 because it comes up in number 1. So for number 1, it says, Sai says, 0 and 20 hundredths is greater than 0 and 2 tenths because 20 is greater than 2. Do you agree? Explain. All right, now let's talk about the invisible 0. That's what I'm calling it. He is saying that 0 and 20 hundredths is greater than 0 and 2 tenths. So I wrote them in the place value chart so that I could compare them, kind of separate them there. And I noticed one thing. I noticed two things actually, that there's a 0 in both ones places. So then when I look to the next place value, they both have a 2. So we move over to the hundredths, but it doesn't have a digit here. Well, when there's nothing there, there's actually a 0. So they are worth the same amount. 2 tenths and 20 hundredths are the same amount. It's just sometimes we write decimals differently. If we were talking about money, then 0 and 20 hundredths would be like 20 cents. Or sometimes people write it 20 cents. But a lot of times runners, they won't have the 0 there if they don't have to. For example, a half marathon, if you know anybody who's done that, I have, is 13 and 1/10 mile, or 13.1, some people say it. That would be a half marathon. Or if you ran a full marathon, it would be 26 miles and 2 tenths. You could put the 0 there though, because it's called an invisible 0, not officially, that's just my name for it. And it would mean the same thing. It would have the same value or the same amount. It's just how we write decimals differently. So going back to Cy and his argument, I am disagreeing with him because they are equal. So I'm going to put Cy is not correct because 20 hundredths is equal to 2 tenths. For number 2 through 5, I'm going to be using my place value chart for them, just because for me it's a little bit easier to compare. So we're comparing, especially because they try to trick you sometimes. So we're comparing 0 and 70 hundredths to 0 and 57 hundredths. I'm looking at my steps. Start on the left. Work your way over until the digits differ. So start here. They're both zeros in the ones place. Go past the decimal over to the tenths, and they are different. Which one is greater? 7 is greater than 5, so 70 hundredths is greater than 57 hundredths. So I will put on my paper a greater than. Now for number 3, I have 0 and 41 hundredths and 0 and 14 hundredths. That's where they try to trick you, because they put both of those decimals have a 1 and a 4, but they're in different place values. So start on the left, work your way over until the digits differ. So same, different. 4 is greater than 1, so 41 hundredths is greater than 14 hundredths. I have 6 and 28 hundredths, and then 7 and 31 hundredths. It would be like if somebody had $6.28 and somebody had $7.31. Who has more money? The person who has $7.31. Start on the left. They're different here, so we can say that 7 and 31 hundredths is greater. Now, you know that you are going to see one with an invisible 0, right? And that's number 5. So we have 1 and 1/10. So we do have something in our ones place here too. And then we have 1 and 10 hundredths. So when you're comparing them, start on the left, they're ones. Work your way over. Not different yet, right? Is it different here? Yes, but that's because this guy is not rocking his invisible 0. So they are equal. This guy was just hiding his 0. So we are going to put an equal sign there.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video and have a great day.
Ow!